River City Girls. What is there to say that hasn't already been said? I'd like to think that there are surely a few, considering for probably the first time someone who doesn't consider themselves a gamer will discuss the game. Now, it may come as a surprise to some that I don't consider myself a gamer, but there is a good reason for this. I barely try out any new games. Last month, the only games I've been playing are Pokemon Sinking Sapphire, Yakuza 0, Terraria, Fortnite, and that's actually it. Maybe a few years ago I could have called myself a gamer because I didn't have any hobbies outside of playing Kirby Star Allies, but as of right now, it doesn't really apply to me. Also, I haven't made a video game related video since last year, so surely I can't call myself a gamer because of that. River City Girls is a game that came out in September 2019. You may be asking yourself right now, but why are you shilling a game that came out 4.5 years ago? There's so many more things to make videos about. Well, dear viewer, please don't remind me about how far away 2019 was. Also, I'm making a video on River City Girls because this. As I was saying previously, RCG is a beat-em-up game developed by ArcSys and WayForward, famous for making other games such as Double Dragon, Guilty Gear, and BlazBlue. The game is a spin-off in the Kunio-kun franchise, which is a long and beloved franchise that I will not go into because I've only played one other game besides River City Girls. Instead of being about Kunio and his chum Ricky, the game follows their quote-unquote girlfriends, these two hot-blooded wackos, Misako and Kyoko. The game was originally released on pretty much all platforms you could think of, with a port later coming to the PS5 and phones for all you 7-year-old iPad kids. All of this to say, the game took the series in an unexpected directions, but I'd like to believe that it was a welcome one considering the game has pretty good reviews, and personally, I loved it. I should also probably mention that River City Girls got a sequel in 2022 and a remastered version of a 1994 game called River City Girls 0, but this video will only cover the first game because I think that most of what I have to say about the first game applies to the second game, and also currently I've only played through about an hour of the second game, and while I have some thoughts, I feel like it doesn't deviate enough from the first game to actually warrant a large part of the video. The main thoughts I have on the second game is that it feels a lot more polished and responsive than the first game, for example with blocking attacks, and the humor feels a lot more like Rick and Morty than in the first. The fourth wall is broken very often, and the characters seem to know that they are in fact in a game yet don't really do anything about it, which is slightly bizarre and Rick and Morty-like. Also, I haven't played far enough yet, but I know that the second game has Alfred voicing one of the NPCs, and the game allows you to choose between 6 characters in total, these being the initial 4 Misako, Kyoko, Kunio, and Ricky, with the addition of Dami Mommy Marion, the character originally in Double Dragon, and Provi, a character originally from River City Ransom Underground, a game that I had to look up on Wikipedia. Additionally, the second game has a lot more references to other franchises like Guilty Gear, with one of the possible recruits being Saul Bad Guy. Wow, the second game is really like Rick and Morty, huh? That's kind of bizarre. River City Girls is a remaster of a 1994 game in the Kunio-kun franchise that people around my father's age have already played, so I won't make a comment on it or I might get crucified on Facebook. And with that long intro out of the way, let's get on with why I love River City Girls so much and why you, the viewer, should care about it. It was established that River City Girls is a beat-em-up game. Now, it's important to know this fact when you listen to what I have to say about the game because I barely have any prior experience with beat-em-ups. The only games I've played in this genre are Scott Pilgrim vs. the World the game, which I completed about 2 months ago despite owning it for about 3 years now, the TMNT game on what I believe was a bizarre hacked Chinese arcade cabinet in a sketchy KTV, and 20 minutes of the first Double Dragon with my dad. So when it comes to beat-em-ups, I probably lack a lot of the qualifications necessary to talk about them in a deep way, but hey, this is YouTube, nobody really knows what they're doing on this platform anyway. From what I can tell using my intellectual insight, is that River City Girls has a much heavier Japanese influence than the other beat-em-ups I've played, despite the series having a long history of being vastly different between Americas and Japan. This is truly Sugoi Desu for all weeaboos who want to experience being your average Japanese high schooler. The setting is probably what helps this game stand out among other beat-em-ups, because while the settings are pretty generic, comprising places like high school, uptown shopping district, mall, the slums, fucking evil Yakuza tower, the presentation of these areas is what makes them stand out. Not only is every area very different from the last, which might be hard considering all areas in one zone must be focused on one theme at all times, RCG pulls this off expertly in terms of diversity in layout, items you can pick up, shops, but most importantly, sprite work. If River City Girls excels at one thing, it's pixel art. Something that bothered me quite a bit with the Scott Pilgrim game was the sometimes bizarre translation from comic designs to pixel sprites. And I know, I can't really criticize art considering what I produce sometimes, but River City Girls manages to make so many different assets of this incredibly saturated world come together so well thanks to these vibrant and constantly moving sprites. Another thing I want to add is the significant lack of outline for everything in the game, which really just helps you immerse yourself into this more fluid game where the characters actually feel like they're a part of the world. Not to say that thick outlines are bad or whatever, it's just that the lack of them is refreshing, especially when it comes right after a playthrough of a game that attempted to emulate the graphic novel style to some success. While on paper the lack of outline should make it harder to discern the actual people you need to beat up from the backgrounds, the sprite works and shading are so well done that you always know where you are despite the numerous assets on screen at all times. Now would also be as good of a time as any to mention the playable characters themselves, because a lot of the charm of the game comes from Kyoko and Misako themselves. The protagonists of the story are two best friends Misako and Kyoko, these people being the quote-unquote girlfriends of Kunio and Riki respectively. Throughout the main game we aren't explicitly told that much about these characters, but I think it's a positive for the game because this way you actually get straight into the action without mashing the A button for 20 minutes. What we are explicitly told as the player is that these girls are obsessed with their boyfriends to an unhealthy amount, as shown with them repeatedly violating all of River City's laws in order to find their boyfriends who have supposedly been kidnapped. They're also gamers and just generally swell people who will always lend you a hand unless your name is Yamada and you have chronic male loneliness. All in all, that's not a lot of information, which might seem like poor storytelling from Arxis, but I personally think whoever designed this game this way is a genius. In every beat 'em up game you unlock moves as you level up, and in some you can also buy attacks. What I love most about RCG is that most purchasable moves are exclusive to one of the girls, and most of them shed a light on how these characters behave outside of situations in which they have to take down the entire Yakuza. Misako has a lot of moves you'd normally expect a fighter to have. While some are flashier than others, a lot involve grabbing someone and throwing them around, or just launching them somewhere else, which can lead to combos, just like in Tag Team WWE. This means that Misako and Kyoko are actually the Viking Raiders, Eric and Ivar, winners of the Raw WWE Championship from October 14th, 2019. While a lot of promotional material shows Misako with these spiked pink brass knuckles, they are nowhere to be seen in game, with the only real weapon Misako possesses being a bag that she swings around, obviously a reference to Dragon Ball GT. This makes Misako out to be a more logical and practical fighter with more reliance on sheer strength and powerful moves, with her throwing powerful punches that can yeet people to the other side of the stage no sweat. She's the tomboy of the duo, choosing to dress in a more quote-unquote traditionally masculine way, avoiding things like skirt, and being the complete opposite of Kyoko in a lot of situations. What unites them though is their ability to act like complete lobotomites. Kyoko is the complete opposite to Misako otherwise. She dyed her hair to this wild orange color for no real reason other than to look like the Friday Night Funkin' Senpai, and she's voiced by Kira Buckland, who also voices Jolene Kujo, Kirumi Tojo, 2B, and Lola. Kyoko is what you'd expect when you think of anime high schooler. She's more expressive, loud, squeamish, ditzy, and wears a skirt. Where Misako is the short-haired tomboy, Kyoko is like Margot Robbie Barbie. From her moveset, you can tell that she's probably more athletic, with more attacks being related to volleyball and cheerleading. She also has some wrestling added alongside the holy grail of all attacks, the dab. That's right, Kyoko has one of the best combo finishers in the form of a base-boosted dab attack. And while Kyoko is often shown to be an airhead, she's also tenacious and is able to defend herself, as seen with how often she's expelled from her past schools and regularly skips schools to hang out with her friend. Even if she's not an intellectual Alex Jones listener, she can still make logical decisions. This is exemplified when she restrains Misako in order to avoid a fight with Noize's yacht guard. Also, she f***ing dabs, showing her incredibly high EQ level. But what's great about these characters is that they bounce off of each other really well. Though they are very different in the way they view the world and choose to present themselves, Kyoko and Misako actually feel like best friends. They often banter with each other, and while they sometimes disagree on how to get their boy toys back, they still obviously care deeply for each other, and there's something so great about that. Kyoko literally starts off the game by skipping school to chill with Misako. If that isn't friendship goals, I don't know what is. Additionally, what's great about these characters is the lack of fan service. For as fan servicey as this game may sound on a surface level, the significant lack of it is such a good breath of fresh air. You don't get any bizarre boob shots or clips of the voice actresses moaning when they get beat down. No! This game actually wants you to know that these characters care about Kunio and Riki and give no f***s about anyone else. This is shown in the way they dismiss literally all other characters, bosses, NPCs, anyone. Misako and Kyoko give zero f***s about anyone else besides their boyfriends and will beat the f*** out of anyone who denies their love. This is seen most evidently in their interactions with Hasebe and Mami, their quote-unquote love rivals, who, once again, spoiler alert, are Kunio and Riki's actual girlfriends. That's right, in one of the endings of the game, it's revealed that Kunio and Riki faked the whole being kidnapped thing in order to avoid the two River City girls because they're obsessed stans who kinda have no life outside of stalking them. This kinda reminds me of someone else. In this ending of the game, the protagonists are shown to be delusional to the point that they truly believe they're in a committed relationship with the boys, and this is probably the canon ending because most of the interactions with NPCs hint at the fact that the boys are trying their best to avoid the girls. Hasebe and Mami are also straight up talking about how they're gonna see the boys later that night, which you as the player just see as some snobby girl being a normal anime love triangle situation. As a player, you don't necessarily believe that the protagonists are insane because you play as them. They can't do anything wrong. I mean, one of them dabs. That's a sign of sanity, right? Twist endings are usually overplayed for no real reason, but this one is so absurd that I love it. To think that you were playing as these two future psych ward escapees who are willing to take down the entire Yakuza empire to see their quote-unquote boyfriends is such a ridiculous premise that it actually works. It's also good that the tone of the game doesn't clash too much with this insane premise, as while sometimes, yes, it tries to take itself seriously with active death threats coming from protagonists or antagonists, the dialogue also has enough comedy to let the player know that having fun with the game is the main priority. Speaking of dialogue in the game, the writing is decent. While there's not much substance beyond, oh, I'm gonna game end you because you are ugly and I am swag, it still manages to fit in with the rest of the game's bizarre nature and doesn't take you out of the experience completely. Overall though, I really enjoy the story for how simple it is because it actually subverts tropes really well. It knows what it's trying to parody and it knows its audience for the most part, so it all works out really well. Beyond the characters in the story, I just want to also take time to appreciate all the effort that went into the small details in the game. And I don't mean the pixel art sprites either. For example, every shop you go to has an exclusive vendor with a few distinct voice lines. Every character is so over the top, with my personal favorite being the Ocean Heights vendor because she reminds me of an effed up looking dog and she sells keys. Some characters even have quote unquote secret voice lines, like the dojo master talking about how he misses his brother instead of the usual totally to-be-tastic or whatever. The fact that NPCs are so different really makes you want to explore the world and actually spend time uncovering all of its secrets, because the effort the developers put in actually helps fill this world up with original characters that you want to know more about. Also, I know I just said I would stop talking about sprite work, but can we just talk about how when you're locked in a battle and chains show up, when characters are launched against it, the chains actually react? Nobody asked for that, and yet it happens. The amount of details that went into this game is kind of insane. I mean, nobody asked that guy standing in line to see the show tonight and there's a light on heavy glow to have hair that long, and yet he does. The artist actually cared about how this game looked and felt, which is pretty cool considering this is a spin-off from a franchise which primarily focus on the stories of these delinquent men. The fact that a spin-off this polished can still be produced in our era gives me hope for the future of gaming. It really does. It would be a shame if I also didn't mention the amazing soundtrack that goes with the game. When you first boot up the game, this punk rock track accompanies a well-animated intro, basically summarizing the lore of the game. This already perfectly sets up the delinquent side to the girls, which is great because all of it is thrown out the window immediately to have a more synthwave-heavy OST. If I were to summarize the soundtrack, it would be music from the movie Drive if some songs were covered by women with powerful voices, so basically just the Drive soundtrack, which really makes me think that if Hotline Miami took place in a Japanified world, it would literally just be River City Girls. One last thing I want to talk about is the manga parts of the game, which are also pretty cool because the art is solid and it's really nice to see mixed media in this supposedly simple beat-em-up game. All in all though, River City Girls, while being a very simple game about two delusional girls taking on the world one psych ward patient at a time, still manages to be one of my favorite games thanks to the attention and care put in by developers and artists involved. You can get both the first and second one really cheap on pretty much any platform, so you should totally do it if you get the chance and enjoy beat 'em up games. Sure, some of the writing can be bizarre. There's a recurring character voiced by Jacksepticeye alongside other YouTuber cameos, and the second game feels like a Rick and Morty episode at times, but River City Girls, through its charm and clever use of subversion of tropes you'd normally expect in anime and video games, manages to suck the viewer into its world, and provides a fun experience for both noobs and diamond rank beat 'em up players, because let me tell you, this game allows for some crazy combos. With that, I thank you for watching, like and subscribe for more life-changing content, and goodbye.